Steve Strange, born Stephen Harrington in Newbridge, Wales, wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was the crowd. Bold, mysterious, and unforgettable, he became one of the defining icons of the 1980s. Thanks to his music, outrageous style, and ability to turn a nightclub into a cultural revolution. Though his roots were in a small Welsh town, Steve's life would take him far from home. After bouncing between places like Aldershot and Rhyl during his childhood, he eventually settled back in Newbridge with his mum following his parents' divorce. School never really grabbed him, except for art, which hinted early on at the creative explosion to come. Everything changed in 1976 when a teenage Steve went to a Sex Pistols gig in Caerphilly. Punk lit a fire in him. He started putting on gigs, made friends with Glenn Matlock, the original bassist of the Sex Pistols and the bassist for the Stranglers Jean-Jacques Burnel, and soon packed his bags for London. There he briefly worked for the infamous Malcolm McLaren and pulled together a band called the Moors Murderers. Their lineup was wild: Chrissie Hynde, Topper Headon, Vince Ely, and more. But like a supernova, they burned bright and fizzled fast. After a quick stint with another band, the Photons, Steve transformed into Steve Strange and created Visage with members of Ultravox magazine and Rich Kids. Their first single didn't do much, but then fate stepped in. David Bowie cast Steve in the haunting Ashes to Ashes video, and with one surreal theatrical performance, Steve helped drag the underground new romantic scene straight into the mainstream. And then came Fade to Grey. Released in 1980, the song didn't just climb the charts, it became a cultural touchstone. Steve, with his striking makeup and alien chic wardrobe, became the face of a generation that didn't care about fitting in. Visage was suddenly everywhere, and Steve Strange was a star not just in Britain but across Europe. While conquering the music world, Steve and DJ Rusty Egan were also rewriting the rules of nightlife. They began hosting themed nights at Billy's in Soho, but it was their next venue, the Blitz Club in Covent Garden, that truly made history. The place was like stepping into another dimension, full of glitter, lace, eyeliner, and attitude. Steve ran the door like a high-fashion bouncer, only letting in the beautifully bizarre. Legend has it, he even turned away Mick Jagger one night, though Steve later insisted it was only because they were at capacity. The Blitz became a launchpad for artists, designers, and musicians. Boy George got his start there. Spandau Ballet cut their teeth on its stage. For a few shining years, it was the epicenter of style and sound. Steve and Rusty kept the momentum going with clubs like Club for Heroes and Camden Palace, though later ventures like The Playground didn't reach the same heights. As the decade wore on, Steve drifted to Ibiza and got swept up in the early trance scene. He was hosting parties for celebrities like Sylvester Stallone and making sure the music never stopped. He also threw himself into new projects. In the early 2000s, he hit the nostalgia circuit with other 80s legends and formed a new version of Visage. It was rocky, but in 2013 they released Hearts and Knives, their first album in nearly 30 years. He also launched a side project called Detroit Stars and kept performing wherever the energy called him. Steve wasn't shy about being in the spotlight. He popped up on TV regularly, on talk shows, documentaries, and even reality programs like Celebrity Scissorhands, where he gave people 80s-inspired makeovers. He made a cheeky appearance in the BBC drama Ashes to Ashes, performing Fade to Grey in a scene set in his beloved Blitz Club. And in a strange full-circle moment, he was portrayed by Mark Warren in a TV film about Boy George's early years. But behind all the glamour, Steve struggled. He was openly bisexual and unafraid to speak about his battles with addiction. Heroin had him in its grip for years, and at one low point, he was arrested for shoplifting a Teletubbies doll for his nephew. A sad story that made headlines. He later admitted he'd had a breakdown. In 2002, he laid everything bare in his autobiography Blitzed, opening up about his darkest moments and his fight to get his life back on track. In his final years, he lived with his family in the seaside town of Porthcawl, finding a kind of peace by the sea. But even then, he was still creating, still chasing the next beat, the next show, the next thrill. In early 2015, while in Egypt, Steve suffered a heart attack and passed away at the age of 55. The response was immediate. That very night, Spandau Ballet dedicated their performance in Italy to him. His funeral in Porthcawl was filled with friends, fans, and famous faces. Boy George and the Kemp brothers from Spandau Ballet carried his coffin, a final tribute to a man who helped make them stars. Although a planned statue never materialized, a heart-shaped gravestone was unveiled in his hometown later that year, paid for by those who loved him. Steve Strange was more than a pop star. He was a beacon for misfits, dreamers, and anyone brave enough to be different. He turned nightlife into an art form, blurred the lines between fashion and identity, and gave countless people the courage to express who they truly were. Even in his struggles, he remained unapologetically himself, bold, beautiful, and endlessly original. Though he's no longer here, his spirit lives on every time someone steps onto a dance floor dressed to impress, every time an outsider finds their tribe, and every time a song like Fade to Grey echoes through the speakers and makes you feel like you belong. Steve Strange made the world a little more magical, and for that, we'll always celebrate him, not just as an icon, but as someone who made being different feel like the most fabulous thing in the world. Shine on, Steve. The club will never be the same without you. But because of you, it will always be extraordinary.